Hey guys, welcome to the Reality Hack channel, and today we're gonna go over a presentation sort of topic on collapse of American Empire. Okay, so Rome lasted about 300 years, and America, the foundation of American Empire was built on the foundations of Rome. Okay, and currently I think America is somewhere around 297th year or somewhere in between the 300-year mark. Okay, and I do feel that by 2030 there's gonna be a lot of changes where the American dominance is gonna slowly erode, you know, unless otherwise, unless there is some thing that they do that they overcome this challenge. So currently we're going to go into the topic of how America, if were to collapse, the case scenario, what's going to happen economically, politically, or militarily. Okay, and how it would trigger a chain reaction globally, because the American influence is tied to all over the world. Okay, at least 90% of the world is deeply tied to the American economy, American culture, and everything else. A lot of things. So let's go over this slide. Oopsie. So US is the linchpin of the current world order. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically, America is like the axis which keeps the wheel spinning. Okay, and US dollar is the world's reserve currency as of now, because most of the global trade, is backed by USD. Okay, everything, if a country has to do a global trade, they have to convert their currency, local currency, into dollar, and then use dollar to trade. Okay, and even the debts of many nations are denominated in USD. So US dollar has acts as a reserve currency, and if you know that finance is the bloodline for our current economic model, so everything runs on USD. And next is the US military presence ensures global stability in shipping lanes, NATO, and strategic deterrence. Okay, so what does this mean? If you see that US bases, if you put on a map or give a search on US military bases around the world, you will see that the world is flooded with American bases all over the world. Okay, I think since World War II they have bases, lot of bases all over the world. So they are acting like a policeman to the world. They are trying to impose their own agenda, will, order on everyone else. The next is the financial markets. Okay, Wall Street is deeply connected to the world economy. Okay, economies worldwide. It's if Wall Street has a minor dip or a major dip, the same the route is followed by all other economies. The What happens in the American market influences the majority of the global market. If the American stocks are going up, every other global market economies are going up. If America has a big dip, every other market is influenced. Okay, because the financial markets are all tied to the American market. So the next is, so also if you see how Trump has introduced the traffic war on all of the nations which don't kind of comply with the American interest. They're being forced to pay extreme traffic on their export, on our on the country doing the export to America, or import, like when America is importing goods from outside. They are charging high tariff, you know, from the imported countries. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right way, but you get my point, okay? So the tech and media and internet infrastructure is all American based, like Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. You know, even most of the countries' government rely on the American internet infrastructure, media and tech. The I think the only country that is kind of exempt from this is China, because they develop their own infrastructure for a lot of things, okay? And even Russia is kind of splitting apart from all of this, so I'm not sure, but still there's maybe majority engaged in the American infrastructure. Unlike China has their own infrastructure on a lot of things. So this is the first reason why the if America were to collapse, what's going to happen, globally, how it would affect, because this is the first reason. US is like the linchpin of the current world order, so everything is going to be affected. And the second point is that the collapse is equal to shockwave. Global trade would seize up, currencies would panic, since everything is tied to USD, and already majority of the currencies have lost like 90 plus percent of their purchasing power. There's gonna be widespread inflationary or deflationary scenario. Paper would be worthless, I feel. Those kind of scenarios might happen if there's a major collapse, and allied governments might fall or face major instabilities, like NATO's, okay, Europe, and the supporting alliance to America, like Israel, okay, especially those heavily dependent on US military and US military or for economic support, is gonna be affected, the governments. And as we went about, the stock market could crash worldwide, leading to massive unemployment and bank runs. Social unrest would spread rapidly. Food, fuel, essential supply chains would be disrupted. This is why the preppers have been preparing for a very long time. I think since the last 2008 crash, I mean the last crash was 2020, but since 2008 crash, people have been realizing that the world is running on a Ponzi scheme. Since the we'll go over it, the next part, I think that would make much more sense, because okay, since the 1950s, let's say, since the 1950s, the world has been sort of running in like a Ponzi scheme. I'll tell you why. It's maybe earlier than 1950s. Since the introduction of the debt-based system, before, the currencies were backed by gold, okay, so governments couldn't print unlimited amounts of money and inflate the system and keep the show running, but they had to issue new currency according to the gold they had in their reserve, okay. And America was going bankrupt during this time, because they were printing too much money and having more expenditure from the government side, so they took off the gold standard. I'll go around it, the specific time when they did this. And when they did this, the world went about on a massive monetary easing policy, monetary printing policy, and this just kept happening. So the third one is that the transition to a new system, okay. So multipolar world order might emerge, which is already happening with China, Russia, BRICS nations, stepping in to form an alternative system, okay, currency, trade, and alliances. Because what is happening is the third world countries and the emerging market are being hit very hard by this exploitative system of USD or American, system. It's only benefiting some of them, while they aren't producing enough, but they are using their financial and military hegemony to destabilize regions around, China, Russia, BRICS, and other, African nations, where resource rich nations are being exploited through the monetary policies. Okay, so this is why the new system is trying to emerge, which is based on a multipolar order, where multiple axis is trying to have power over how the world is being influenced, instead of, the Western alliances. So this is leading to the new reserve currency, might lead to also a new reserve currency, BRICS digital currency, or gold backed system. And China and many of the BRICS nations are loading up on gold a lot. Localized economies and barter in the short term. This is already happening between Russia, India, or even China, I guess. They are trading with their own currencies and other loopholes through the existing structure. Rise of authoritarianism or technocracy to control the chaos. This is already happening through the West. They're trying to introduce this, tech based surveillance system. So these are all the, intermediaries that is, coming under the influence of this issue. So the fourth one is like the uncertainty and the opportunity that comes from this collapse of American empire. Okay, so the collapse is not just a destruction, it's also a reset. Okay, and I think through the centuries, or through the past, these resets have been happening over and over. These resets are not just the global economic structure reset or the global political scenario reset, but also a geophysical reset we are watching right now. As you can see, there's a lot of earthquakes, tsunamis, and climate crises happening. And this is not because of the climate change, that's just the hoax they are introducing, but it is a bigger cosmic or universal cycle that we're going through, something related to the magnetic pole shift. Okay, and the solar cycles. There's different solar cycles that the earth goes through, and I think we are going through one of that right now. And the systems built on control, manipulation, and unsustainability may die. Okay, so the current system is very unsustainable because it's not backed by actual value, but just inflating the system with unlimited monetary easing or money supply. Okay, putting everyone into excessive debt which cannot be repaid, and then probably be like, you own nothing, we'll own everything, we'll manage everything, and you'll be happy, if you know what I mean, where I'm taking this from. Okay, so I think by 2030 they have this, through this collapse they want to bring about a new totalitarian world order, while on the other side few nations are trying to resist it and trying to bring out their own currency, like the BRICS is trying to bring their own system to bypass through the trade barriers, the existing trade barriers, set by the US, NATO, and alliance, and the financial hegemony which is happening through the USD. So the new decentralized models, maybe blockchain, local governance, conscious communities may rise. This is the one side of the story. Or if there's like a totalitarian regime, then there would be CBDCs. Okay, which is central bank digital currency, which is going to be very highly monitored. Not like the new decentralized models, which blockchain, local governance, and conscious communities may bring. So let's go on to the next slide, guys. So the collapse of the post World War II global consensus. So what does this mean? So the current system that we are living through right now began after the post World War II scenario. Like the nations came together to make a rule based system, like blah blah blah, this and this. So that is the system that we are still running on. Okay, and most of it is trauma based, I think. Majority of the nations, the western nations and the ruling nations suffered, maybe even the collective world suffered deep trauma through the World War One and the World War Two crisis. Okay, there was a lot of suffering, and the same suffering was carried on into the collective psyche. The current systems we are living now, I think, is built on that foundations of the World War Two, situation. So we're living through the collapse of the post World War II global consensus now. Now that system which was started during the World War II consensus is kind of falling apart. The cracks are no longer subtle. The entire order was built on shared illusions. Power plays masked as cooperations and manipulative structures designed to benefit the few while pacifying the many. So let's go over the next slide and see how it works. So the World War II consensus includes the Bretton Woods system of 1944, okay, the creation of IMF, World Bank, and pegging currencies to the US dollar, which was backed by gold until 1971. So as I was talking earlier, we went into a debt based system by backing all of the currencies of the world to another fiat currency and ensuring the trust on the American economy and the American government, okay, which was backed by gold. That was removed, and there was all of this created. And what happened with the creation of IMF and World Bank was all of these emerging or poor economies were given debts. They were given debts and then put into debt trap. Majority of the African nations, some of the Asian nations, like Pakistan was also influenced by this. So they were given debt, and then they were enslaved by debt. Their resources, the countries become a pawn to the Western influence. So US emerged as a global economic leader during this time, and this formed the monetary skeleton of the global system we've lived under until now, okay? And we're still living under it. The second is the United Nations. After the worldwide consensus brought about, the United Nations, which was enacted, I guess, in 1945, supposed to ensure peace and cooperation, in practice often a tool of manipulation with power concentrated in the hands of Security Council, especially US, UK, France, Russia, China. Okay, but I don't think that Russia and China was concentrated with this power. I feel the United Nations mainly benefited the Western allies. Okay, Russia, China might have progressed economically, benefited from this peace and cooperation because of the healthy trade environment, but the major influence was for the Five Eyes, which is UK, US, Australia, Canada, which come under the same surveillance network, okay, and the NATO nations, okay, also Israel. So this was kind of United Nations where they say it is for the betterment of everyone, but few nations had upper hand over all the other nations. Third, petrodollar agreement of the 1970s. Okay, the oil traded in USD and forced the world to use and store dollars. This gave the US economic dominance, but also enslaved nations into an artificial financial structure. Okay, and any nations that stood up against these scheme of America were bought down, their leaders were bought down and called dictators, or they needed freedom, they needed democracy, and they would get into war in Iraq. This is what happened in a lot of places like Iraq, or the assassination of Gaddafi and other leaders who stood against the American or the Western hegemony. Okay, the fourth one is that the military and ideological hegemony. Okay, so as I said, the American bases are all over the world, and uh, the secret agencies, or the secret societies, and the CIA, secret intelligence operations, all worked in undercover to hold this regime. The covert wars, regime changes, CIA operations all over the world, NATO, all to preserve order. Okay, sold to the public as fighting for freedom and democracy, but mostly maintained corporate, financial, and geopolitical interest. Okay, this is the situation. But now what's happening? The lie is crumbling. Truth spreads faster than ever, and people are waking up. This is why there is a lot of chaos in the world. It is to consolidate power and to you know re-establish a new world order, through the collapse of the old consensus. But what is happening is truth spreads faster than ever, and people are waking up. Elites are panicking, using chaos, war, fear, distraction to keep things under control. All institutions are losing trust: media, banking, governments, healthcare, education, all exposed for manipulation. People are not trusting the institutions anymore. Decentralized systems, crypto, Web3, so on communities are also on a rise, which is very on a smaller community or a smaller percentage, but it's still rising. Okay, and it's a big mess, the world we are in right now, and most of these transitions are kind of painful, and we don't know how much more damage we're gonna endure, because the old is still resisting when it's dying, but it's resisting, and the new is not yet fully born. Okay, that's the situation we're in right now. So lies don't last very long. That's the essence. A lie may control a generation or even a century, but truth is timeless. Okay, the truth is eternal, and when people start to see clearly, no structure, no matter how powerful, can hold. We are living through that great reckoning, I feel. you know so let's go over the next slide. Okay, I am so sorry. Yep, I guess that is it. So I'm sorry, guys, that was the last slide and that was the conclusion. I thought there was more, but because these things are so big that we can go on talking about it. There's endless amounts. We could expand on these topics, but I'll keep making more videos regarding these kind of things. So this was it for the collapse of the American Empire. I guess we'll see about in the next video. I'm not sure what topic I'm gonna be heading towards, but please like if you like this video, and stay subscribed. I'll keep improving the quality of the videos. As of now, I'm just starting out, so please bear with me. And once again, thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time.